Morning everyone who's joined so far. We'll wait a couple of minutes because we're expecting quite a big group this morning, but we will try and get going in a couple of minutes and people will be able to join as they can, but we're nearly there, I think. Okay, so welcome everybody. I think we will make a start. As I said, people can join as they come in, and we are expecting a very large group this morning. So it's lovely to be here with you and sort of see names and faces, some new, some who I know well. But thank you for finding a time to join us for this important meeting to talk a bit about the upcoming cyclical programme review. And for those who don't know me, I'm Lyndon Martin. I'm the Vice Provost Academic, which gives me sort of the oversight of the quality assurance process here at York, and one of those elements being a cyclical programme review. So we are going to run the meeting this morning, just a couple of housekeeping pieces here. We are going to run it as kind of a webinar format. We are such a big group and an awful lot to cover. So we're not going to have an opportunity to take sort of hands up and questions, because I think that could just take up the time very, very quickly. But I do want to say that we will keep the chat open, and if people want to pose questions in the chat, if somebody from my team or one of the presenters is able to answer in the chat, they will do so. If not, we will take away the questions in the chat and ensure answers are posted to those. So by all means, feel free to use the chat to put things into, and we'll respond later if we can't do so immediately. We will also try and keep to time as much as possible and hopefully finish by 10:30. If for any reason we don't, and certainly people are free to leave whenever, we are recording the meeting. So we will ensure that everything that needs to be covered is covered. And if people want to, look later at the recording for anything they missed or to relook at something, that will also be available. So I hope that's going to work for us this morning. So, as I said, welcome. So I thought I'd just make a few sort of opening remarks here. And some of you may be quite familiar with quality assurance in Ontario, and others, it may be quite new for you around this. So just a few very brief remarks around this. You may know that, quality assurance in Ontario sits under something called the Ontario Universities Council on Quality Assurance, which we usually just refer to as the Quality Council. It's something that was established 13 years ago now, 2010, and has oversight for the quality assurance framework processes for all Ontario universities. Importantly, the Council operates at arm's length from both the universities and from the government. And in particular, it's a provincial body responsible for assuring the quality of all programmes, including new undergraduate and graduate programmes, and the audit of each university's quality assurance processes. So, that is the provincial body that, sort of oversees the work that we do internally, and all of our processes obviously have to align with the quality assurance framework and what Quality Council have in place. So it's important just to remember the larger context in which we work. I would say that quality assurance, we like to think of it as a dynamic process in Ontario and also at the university. And in 2018 there was an external review panel, and that resulted in an updated quality assurance framework. And I think the biggest shift that we see in that framework, and also at the university, is a much clearer and better articulated commitment to foster a culture of an investment in continuous improvement. And I think that is the biggest change, this notion of iterative continuous improvement. So while compliance is still, obviously always important in these processes, I think we've now moved away from that being the primary emphasis to this notion of how can we really help programs, to think about what they're doing with students and how, that can be improved. The Quality Assurance Framework has 15 principles, and I'm certainly not going to read all of those to you today, but if you visit the Quality Council website, there's lots of documentation there that is worth looking at. But I thought I would just mention Principle 1, which I think is really an important one. And that says, the best interest of students is at the core of quality assurance activities. Quality assurance is ultimately about the centrality of the student experience in Ontario. It's about student achievement in programs that lead to a degree or diploma, about ensuring the value of the university degree in Ontario, and of ensuring that our highly qualified graduates continue to be strong and innovative contributors to the well-being of Ontario's economy and society. So again, just as a larger situating, I think that notion about the best interest of students being central to everything that we're going to talk about today is something I just wanted to highlight. Thanks. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the agenda for today, and we're really going to get into talking about the York Quality Assurance Framework and particularly the Cyclical Programme Review. So as I said, Quality Council have the Quality Assurance Framework. We have our own framework, which is kind of the processes through which we implement that framework known as UCAP. We're going to talk a bit about the timelines for the CPR, some of the key things you should be thinking about now and will need to be thinking about over the next couple of years. And most importantly, introduce you to some experts who are going to support you in many elements of the CPR self-study and beyond. So that's something that we hope will be really useful to you. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so as I said, the UCAP document, which you hear mentioned very often, it's a key piece, and it talks about all of the process that we have in place for these things. And in particular today, we're going to be talking about the review of existing programs. I would note that we've done quite a lot of work since a new framework. There's a new website that's just been launched now that I think is much more supportive and much nicer to navigate. We've also done a lot of work on templates as well. So we're hoping that the templates that you will use to prepare your self-study will both be, more user-friendly and more helpful around the ideas of continuous improvement that we've been talking about. And we'll certainly always welcome feedback on those if there's things that still we can do better with that. But we're hoping that what you have will be helpful. Next slide. So again, talking a little bit about principles here. These are the two key principles that sit under quality assurance, that we're all concerned about academic quality as the university's highest academic objective. And that quality assurance, while my office oversees it, it is a collegial responsibility. And it is shared by many people who come together through this process to think about the improvement of programs. Shared by academic units, programs, academic colleagues, faculty councils, senate and subcommittees. So it really is sort of a pan-university process that we engage with here. And really, as it says, CPRs are premised on this idea that in some way every program can be improved, and that regular evaluation directed towards improvement is something we should all be thinking about as we move forward. So I think it's important to hold those things, again, this notion of continuous improvement as being central to everything. Next slide. So just a very brief overview of how this sort of sits within the university. You'll see that Vice President, Academic and Provost formally has, the main accountability for this, although it's delegated to my office. And, I have the oversight for the administration of processes. Faculties have a key part to play here. Programs do their piece, but then also the deans or principal have a couple of very important roles. They will provide statement for reviewers, responses to recommendations, and also, and this is something quite important, following a CPR, they will also produce an 18-month follow-up report. And this again speaks to the continuous improvement idea. We're really trying to sort of think, CPRs are not just something that happen every 8 years and then go away again. We really want to say, well, look, what did we say we were going to do here? And how is it working at the 18-month mark and beyond? So that is important. Within Senate, just so you're aware, there is a joint subcommittee on quality assurance that is an elected subcommittee of Senate. They sort of have oversight of compliance with the policy and framework, and they also confirm the implementation plan and final assessment report. So as you'll probably know, at the end of a cyclical program review, there's a final assessment report, a confirmation of what people are going to do, what programs have agreed to do, what the Dean wants programs to do. And at the end of the day, that is actually approved, by this Senate subcommittee as being appropriate. So I think it's important to remember that collegial piece plays in at that stage in the process as well. Next slide. Okay, so what does a CPR look like then? So these are kind of some of the three main pieces if you wanted to break it down a bit. They do occur every 8 years. So every program has to go through a review of no more than 8 years. It has to be launched and begin. And usually, as you know, it takes a couple of years from start to finish, depending how quickly programs get things together and when they decide to do the site visit with external reviewers. A CPR is a self-assessment of a program's strength and areas for improvement, really informed by the UAP, which, I think we all know should be central to everything that we're kind of thinking about in the institution. But it is very much a self-assessment. It is a chance for a program to reflect on itself, to look back at where it's come since the last CPR or since its launch, to use some of the data, some of the information that shows where it is, but also most importantly to make it looking forward. Again, this notion of improvement. It's very much a collegial and consultative process informed by input from faculty, staff, students, associate deans, and of course external reviewers. So in a way, it's one of those things where we say the more people you can have involved in the CPR, generally the stronger it is and the more helpful it is. So it's a very open collegial process in that way, and we really encourage you to think about it in those terms. Next slide. Thanks. So a little bit of the timing. I'm not going to go through this in detail because you'll have this slide with you to sort of look at, but you will see some of the key pieces here, launch meeting, survey development of the questions you might want to ask students, and we'll talk a bit more about that. And most importantly there, I would say start developing the self-study. There may be sections of the self-study that programs can already start thinking about, program learning outcomes, descriptions, those kinds of things. So a little bit of advice is don't wait for all kinds of things to happen and then think, oh no, now we've got to write this long document. Start looking at it now and getting it going. You'll see then some of the processes that follow through in winter and then to spring, where we look at the external reviewers particularly, and also the idea of holding a faculty retreat, which is something programs often do. So bringing together perhaps for a day or a half day to look at, what are some of the key questions you want to reflect and think about. And then you will see 2 dates there of when the self-study document is due in my office, either July the 15th, 2024 or October the 15th, 2024. And that depends when you want the external reviewers to come in. So there's a little bit of time there. But that'll just give you a sense of some of the key dates and the sort of pieces that need to happen in between that. So you've sort of got roughly a year to be getting the self-study into place and preparing for the site visit. And key at the bottom there is, just key at the bottom there is, this all looks like a lot. And I really want to stress we're going to provide a lot of data, a lot of expertise and a lot of support to help you with this. So I don't want anybody to feel sort of overwhelmed at this point, and hopefully through the meeting you'll learn more about some of that. Next slide. Okay, so again, that just sort of sets out the next stage of the events that follow once the self-study is being submitted. As you know, we bring external reviewers in. Each program will have 2 external reviewers, and the way I describe them, that is a chance to get collegial eyes on your program in a supportive way. And reviewers very much are charged with looking at a program and making some recommendations for what a program may be able to think about in the next few years. And one thing I do want to say here, and I will keep saying, and this is important I think for programs as well, what we are looking for out of a CPR is always a small number of actionable items. We don't want either programs or external reviewers coming up with 50 recommendations after which everybody throws up their hands and just simply can't do that. So we really encourage you to look for a small number of things that you think are key to focus on over the next few years. 3, 4, 5, 6, something in that kind of area. You know, it depends how detailed they are, it depends where your program is. But we really are looking for a small number of actionable recommendations that a program can then, you know, put into place and take forward through their final assessment report and their implementation plan. And hopefully at the 18 months, be able to report back that there's been progress made on these. So again, small, actionable items is what we're looking for. Next slide. Yeah, I think I've just mentioned that. There'll be 2 external reviewers who ideally have academic expertise, obviously, in the area. So you want people who can bring something to the program, have an understanding of the context in which you're working. Ideally, some administrative experience can also be helpful with that. You also have 1 internal reviewer, and in a way the internal reviewer doesn't really review, they actually act more as a guide to the university. You will guess if we have 2 people who are, you know, sometimes new to Ontario or will always be new to York, the internal person can be a really good guide to all things York, and, you know, can help explain some of those sorts of particular pieces of the context that the review's taking place in. It's worth starting to think early about the reviewers. Initially, the program will nominate, the Dean or Principal ranks, and then myself and the Vice Provost Graduate Study also get involved, and then my office selects and issues the formal invitation. It is important that programs themselves don't go out and try and solicit reviewers, and that isn't something that we encourage at all. So it is my office that does that and determines who to invite. But I would ask you to start thinking about who might be good reviewers. There are some arm's length criteria, and we're happy to share those at an early stage if you want to start thinking about this. But do start looking at who might be good people to bring to your programs. Next slide. Then we have the site visit, and you know, this is really where, you know, pre-COVID these were all done in person, and the reviewers would come to campus usually for a couple of days. I will say my 3 years in this role, I've never had the pleasure of doing an in-person one, which I find a little bit sad, but anyway, we have been doing them virtually. And they will come and they will meet with the program, they will meet with students, they will meet with staff, they will meet with everybody over a 1 or 2 day period to have all kinds of conversations. They'll meet with the dean, associate deans, everybody who's kind of been involved in the self-study report. We are now permitted to do virtual site visits on an ongoing basis, which is a shift that's come from Quality Council. But I would note that we are required, if we want to have a site visit virtual, that there's a justification for the decision to use that option. And the reviewers also have to agree that they're happy to come. So even if you say we would like this to be a virtual site visit, and you can see some of the reasons you may want to share as to why that's a good case, we also have to ensure the reviewers are in agreement with that. And you'll see some of the factors to consider there. I will say, you know, one of the great things that the virtual piece has allowed us to do, it's made it much easier to have international reviewers. And that, you know, I think has been a big strength on getting some really interesting people looking at programs. And certainly that can be a strong justification for having a virtual site visit. So again, not something you need to decide now, but I would say start thinking about the site visit. Would you want it to be in person? Would you want it to be virtual? Think about who would participate if you use one means or the other. And we're happy again to talk through some of that with you as helpful. Next slide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the self-study then. Next slide. So as I said, CPR, forward-looking process that relies on participants. And again, look at elements of your program to identify, describe, provide an analysis of the program and opportunities for enhancement. And just to make a comment about analysis there, you know, you are going to get a lot of data provided to you about enrollment trends, retention trends, you'll have student survey data, all of that. The data itself is not what matters, it's the questions you ask of the data. So, you know, and it's also not a research project. So I think, you know, sometimes as researchers, we get very bogged down in, you know, what's our methodology for working with the data? What are we going to do with it? And I like to think of it a little bit differently. The data is a form of information that will help you ask questions of your program and might highlight for you things that either you suspected and now confirmed, or may show new things that you want to think about. So really it's how you work with the data that is most important, and we'll talk a bit about that later. Next slide. Okay, just to remind people, I think everybody is familiar with the UAP, I hope so, but this forms a big part of the self-study and of the CPR. That again, everything that we're trying to do here is aligned with the UAP, and hopefully, programs and changes we make to programs enhancement are looking at how they align with the UAP priorities and how the changes, the things that you want to do in your program are advancing some of the priorities. So please keep that as sort of central there. And in the
That's for a full day, right?
You will be asked to talk about that as well. Next slide. Okay, a little bit about the CPR process, and again, this is just a graphic to show all of the different pieces that sort of make up what comes to a self-study. Most important on the left, the conversations, whether those be retreats, focus groups, informal conversations, department meetings, whatever you decide, the conversations I think around the program are most important. There is then the second piece, which is kind of the data that you'll be provided through my office and through some of the people we hear from today. And then, as I've just said, the analysis. The self-study is really the analysis, the looking at where you are and the looking forward. And that's really the most important piece. Yes, it's a reporting process, but it's an analytic forward-looking piece, most importantly. Next slide. Okay, again, I won't talk through this. There's 8 sections you'll see in the self-study that you'll need to complete. Some of these will, pretty much be, reporting information. Some of them will be much more analytic, and each section will have a chance for you to comment, on those and what you see in the section, what your ideas are there. And the one I would talk about most importantly then is quality enhancement. That is really the section where we ask you to share, bring it all together, and tell us what are your small number of things you both want the external reviewers to give you advice on and that you think you are going to want to work on in the next few years. So quality enhancement is really the key section there. Not that the others aren't important, particularly learning outcomes, which may be something you want to revisit, but important to sort of look at all of those. Next slide. Okay, I don't think I'm going to go through all of this. You're going to hear quite a bit from some of the people this morning who are going to provide some of this, but again, to highlight all of the different documents and data that will feed into each section. And the key piece is that most of these will be providing you information and help to support this. So you'll see the 8 sections are all informed by particular pieces that will be provided to you to help you with this, so they don't sit in isolation. Next slide. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to introduce you now to some experts who can support you in this process and who will be very important resources for all the programs as you begin the CPR. Next slide. So there's sort of 4 key people here you're going to hear from this morning, or 4 key officers. My office, Vice Provost Academic, obviously does a lot in this. There's the Office of Institutional Planning and Analysis, OIPA, who will be providing all kinds of data around enrolment, retention, those kinds of things at quite some detail. ISR will help you with the student survey and questions for those who are going to do that. And then also the libraries who work with you, both in providing a letter and in thinking about the role of the library in the process as well. And again, collaborative, collegial. Next slide. Okay, so just so you know who's in my office, I've introduced myself. Other key people who you may have heard from, and if you haven't, you will soon. Jennifer Buffoon. I don't know if Jennifer can wave or not, but you may see her on screen. She's the Interim Director of Academic Programs and Policy. Some of you may have dealt with Emily Rush previously, who's on a very happy maternity leave at the moment and will be returning. So Jennifer is a very key person in this. Samantha Kutrara, who's our Program and Curriculum Development Specialist, who may also be able to wave. Some of you probably know Samantha, and she'll be running some of the workshops you're going to hear from about later in today. And also Nina Unatene, who I suspect everybody has heard from, who is our wonderful quality assurance coordinator and will work around much of the administration and organisation of various parts of the CPR. So if Nina's there, she can wave as well. So those are some of the key people in my office. I will say we pride ourselves on being a very accessible and open office. If you email us, if you have any question, nothing is too trivial or too small, we will get back to you. We are happy to meet with people. We are always happy to talk to help this process be as productive as possible. Next slide. So as I said, we provide administrative support, specific assistance with curriculum learning outcomes and the support workshops. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to some of the people who are going to sort of help from the other offices. So first is OIPA, Institutional Planning and Analysis. Contact information is there with their email, and I'm not sure whether they have Mark or Iris with us this morning and who's going to speak to these slides. Iris, is it going to be you? Just looking at the list.
Sorry about that. I'll jump in. I've just got a couple of minutes. I might have to sort of tag Iris in a couple of minutes. I'm Mark. I'm a director in the Office of Institutional Planning and Analysis. Iris is also with us on this call. And Iris is, I would say, largely, and by that I mean like 99%, responsible for all of the good work that goes into creating the data kits, at least on the OIPA side. And then we also have Victoria Ng, and she works on the survey side of things in OIPA. And so things like NESI results, the Ontario University Graduate Survey, that's the employment survey, CGPSS, that's a survey that goes out to graduate students. She takes care of all that kind of information for us. So we provide the data kit. We're available to help answer questions about that data, whether it's kind of technical, what's in, what's out of this table, or maybe questions about how to interpret the data and so forth. And we try and make ourselves readily available for that kind of thing throughout the process.
I think you have a couple of slides there, Mark and Iris. Yep, if you want to say anything on these.
Right. So the data kit comes out in February, and those will be distributed to you via, I believe, a Teams site, and that will be come out through the VPA's office. It contains data required to produce the self-study review, and both to kind of put into the review in whole or part, and then some other ancillary data that we hope is useful to reflect upon as part of your self-study process. So those are the two kind of broad categories of data contained in the data kits that you'll receive in February. If we can move forward. Yeah, so in February, the data kit provides customized data for each department and their programs undergoing a review. It has previous self-study documents in one section of the data kit. Well, I guess that's not really the data kit proper, but that's on the team site. The data kit itself provides admissions data going back, it must go back, I think, about 10 years or so. It provides enrollment, retention, and graduation data, including survey data for your programs. And there are a variety of other resources in the data kit. The student survey results, I want to, there's the student survey that you'll be hearing from Institute for Social Research about, ISR. And then there's other surveying work like the student self-assessment, what have you, that there's a distinction there that's probably good to keep in mind, and I'll just leave it there. So if it's the student survey that you're doing for the CPR proper, that's ISR. Stuff like NESI, CGPSS, and so forth, that's OIPA. Next slide.
I think that might be it, Mark. I think those are your slides. So again, contact information is there, and Mark and Iris will be very happy to sort of help with questions around this. You know, as you get the data, it really is, very, very important. So
great.
You both. Was there anything you wanted to add, Iris, while you're there? I'll take that as a no. Okay, so moving on then. So the next group that we're going to hear from is Institute for Social Research, and I see Liza's there. I'm not sure, is David there as well? Liza?
David is here, yes.
Okay, so I'll hand it over to David and Liza to take us through the next few slides and talk about the work that you do in supporting programs.
Good morning. I think the survey is the simplest part of the CPR process. It's easy, okay? I want to say something very briefly about who we interview, something about the questionnaire, and something about what you get from us in the end. So the programs have to have 75 or more students who are majors in the program to get a survey. Typically, undergraduate programs only survey first-year students. Graduate participation is much easier. If you're a graduate student and you're registered, you're in the program, you get to be interviewed. The number of students that we think are in your program, we actually get the number of students from OIPA. We will actually send that to programs before we start the survey. So the first check that we have is to say, we think you have this many students in these programs, and you're going to write back and say, yes, you got it right, or no, we need to make some adjustments. We move on to the questionnaire. We conduct a survey for the Office of the Vice Provost and for the programs. The VPA has already developed the core questionnaire for the 2024 survey. It's much like the core questionnaire for the last 2 years. The core questionnaire is fixed. Certainly we can change terminology and language to make the questions suitable for what's unique about your program. But we can't throw out questions. We can't change the context of questions. We can't pull things apart on a whim. The core questionnaire addresses a number of issues. The first thing that we address, for example, is student satisfaction and engagement. And if you think back a couple of slides that Dr. Martin showed, you see that that's one of the first aspects that you have to report on in the self-study. We talk about the extent, we ask students about the extent that they're achieving a set of learning outcomes. We ask about experimental education. We asked about a lot of other issues that are things that you need to address in the self-survey. So that's a fixed core questionnaire that we're going to take care of. Programs can add to the questionnaire. Some programs choose just to use the core, and that's it. Most programs add questions. You can add up to 7 questions. We encourage you to have no more than 1 question that is open-ended. Programs ask questions about lots of interesting things: recruitment issues, curriculum issues, extracurricular activities and events. Some programs expand on topics that are already in the questionnaire. So it's not unusual for a program, for example, to say, okay, I see that there are the core learning outcomes that the university wants to know about, but in our program, we also think we need to know about these 3 or 4 things. And so they might add questions to the learning outcomes, or they might add questions about other things that are of interest to them. The questions can be asked of subsets of students. So you can actually say, well, we think we need to address an issue for our MA students that's a bit different than we want to address to our PhD students. So in the actual questionnaires, you can have variations of questions that are asked for different groups, honor students or non-honor students, for example, female versus male students, and so on. So you can get creative in terms of who gets asked what. Some programs like to repeat questions that they used before. If you want to repeat questions that you used in your last CPR, you should let us know, because we have a copy of them. If you probably do as well, we hope. The other thing is that most things that we can think of, some program at some time asked them. So we have an inventory of questions. So it's not like you have to sit down and write questions from start to finish. You just need to say, we want to have additional information about recruitment. We're thinking of these 3 or 4 things. And then ISR and the program will engage in a conversation, and away we'll go. The survey is completed online. The sample of students I mentioned comes from OIPA. The sample includes a number of variables such as gender, entry status, current GPA, number of credits, and so on, that you don't have to ask in the survey. So when you see the first draft of the survey, when you see the core questionnaire, you can say, oh, there's things missing. Well, they come actually as part of the sample. Students will get multiple requests to do the survey. We know that the more we ask students to do it, the more likely they are. Response rates vary dramatically from the low 30s to the high 60s. Programs can help encourage students to participate in the survey, and some programs are really quite successful in that regard. And we can talk about ways that programs can help enhance the response rates when we meet with them individually. The survey is confidential, but it's not anonymous. We track who completes the survey so that we can actually not bombard students with requests if they've already done the survey. The survey results will come as a set of word tables. They're designed to be very easy to read, and they're designed so that you can cut and paste them into, for example, your self-study report or other places. They are essentially frequency tables or marginal accounts for every question in the survey. Text answers, you sort of say, what's the best thing about the program, or what could the program do to help you finish on time? Questions that are open-ended that have text answers. These are much more demanding of the program, because in order to get anything out of text questions, you have to read every one of them. The other thing about text questions is that sometimes students in their answers can actually provide names of faculty members, or they can talk about a particular course. And because anonymity is important, we're going to go through the text files and remove obvious things, but someone in the program who's involved in CPR has to review all the text files before they're shared with the program as a whole. So there's a lot of work involved around doing the text answers. If programs want more complicated analysis than just frequency counts or marginal distributions, answers for each individual question, we can actually do that for you, but we cannot do that for you until we give every program their basic summary results. So if you want more complicated tabs, say you want to break down by year student or by gender student, that can come, but it comes much later in the process. We're talking sort of like May, June type of time frame. However, if you're a program and you want to do more things with the data, we encourage you to take a copy of the data file. We'll make sure that it's impossible. Student numbers and other things that identify students will be taken out, but we can give you an SPSS file, a SAS file, a data file, and programs can do additional analysis if we want. Of course, we're going to make sure for small programs that when we give you the data file, you can't run a bunch of crosstabs and say, oh, wow, there's only one student here, I know who it is. So we're going to work on protecting students' confidentiality, but you can have a copy of the data file. You can do additional analysis and more complex analysis if you want. If you're not in a hurry, you can wait for us to do that later on in the process. Let me say something about very briefly about very small programs. On the new website, there is some information about how small programs can collect data from their students. These are usually versions of focus groups or town halls or meetings that you might have at lunch where you serve pizza and Coke and you talk about 3 or 4 issues that are concerned with the program. So you invite the students into some kind of participatory event. It's a much more qualitative experience. Some programs actually do both. We do the survey for them, and then they might actually do some follow-up general meetings or town halls for students to sort of tease out in a more qualitative way some of the things that they got from the survey itself. ISR doesn't do this work, but we're happy to advise. We also can provide you with things like confidentiality agreements for students to sign if they're going to participate in the focus group, so on and so forth. So we can provide some advice to that if you want. There is a timetable in the slides. I think it's the next one down. I'm not going to go over in detail, but we want to encourage you to follow it with care. There's a lot of programs that keep slipping behind in the schedule, just get further and further to the back of the list about when they get their data and get their results. So for most programs, the survey is really pretty straightforward. It's a much easier process and much easier to follow once you meet with either myself or Eliza. Generally, what happens is each program ends up being assigned to either myself or Eliza. We work back and forth, but there's so many programs that sometimes easier for us to split the programs into 2 groups. What we encourage you to do is to target a key person or a key couple of people who are going to be working with ISR in the survey and reach out to either Eliza or myself or both of us. We'll set up a meeting and we'll start moving forward. I can take questions now or at the end.
David, I'm just going to add something. Yep. Jennifer, if you could go back to slide 26, please. 25 is good. Or 26 is good. David referred a couple times during his presentation to the core questionnaire. The core questionnaire is a series of questions that is fixed, or in other words, it's required for all programs to ask this set of core questionnaires that we have developed with Lyndon's office. And maybe Jennifer, you could share the link to where program people can find the core questionnaires for either undergraduate programs or graduate programs. And that, I would suggest, is the first thing you should look at before you decide, before you want to meet with either David or I. So it's the core set of questions. Have a look at those. And then if you think it would be a good idea to add custom questions to that set, then reach out to one of us.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. So if people have questions, I suggest they put them in the chat, and then we can, either David or Liza will respond in the chat now, or we will take them away and get back to you on this. My office will also be providing some follow-up information about this, as to which programs are going to get a survey, advice for programs who aren't going to get a survey, on what to do. So watch your email boxes. There's going to be some follow-up information coming on this. And I would say, as you take us away and think about it, you're also welcome to send a question either directly to ISR, you have the email addresses in the slide, or through my office. We will always channel it to the right people. So please, as I say, as you go away and look at this, I'm sure you will have questions, things will come up. So please don't feel this is your only chance to ask questions at all. I prefer people to go away, think, and then we can, have conversations as is helpful. So thank you, David and Liza. That's great. This is a really important part of the CPR. So thank you again for the work you do on it. Okay, that probably takes us to... Okay, and now over to York University Libraries. And I think Cheryl is here with us, who is going to talk a little bit about the role of the libraries. Is that right, Cheryl?
That's correct. Thank you, Linda.
Great, thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. With me today is Michael Moyer. He is the Director of Content Development and Analysis Department, so he might have something to add to my comments. I'm not sure, but he is here with us. So I'm Cheryl Hook. I'm the Associate Dean of Libraries for Teaching and Learning, and it's largely in that CDA department that I just mentioned where the course statements to support your program reviews occurs. We actually have a template. I'm sure some of you have seen this already. And that template covers a number of different elements, including it provides an overview, and then there's a statement on the collections that support your programs, statement on library instruction, a statement on spaces and technologies, statement on research assistance, publishing supports that we offer. So those are the elements of the template that we complete, again, with your specific areas in mind as we complete it. And then, so that's our process. But what I wanted to also share with you is that because we had access to the ROTA schedule, I've already identified every librarian who will be assigned to this. So we're ready to go whenever you're ready to ask for the library support statement. You can either contact me directly. Do we have another slide, or is this just one for me? I can't remember. Okay, this is fine. Contact me directly, or if you do know your subject librarian, we do have folks who are on sabbatical. So I'm not sure if someone in your areas could be away. You can either contact me directly or contact the subject librarian. Either way, the subject librarian, if you contact that person, will contact me because I manage the whole process for the library. So the librarian will complete the template. That template is then sent to me for review. I then send that template to our administrative assistant, who gets a covering letter from the Dean of Libraries. So then that's Andrea Kosovic, who will then sign that letter and send the whole package to whoever from your department has contacted us. Sometimes it's the faculty member who's involved in the review. Sometimes we're contacted by an administrative assistant from your departments. And that's where we're at. So happy to take any questions, but it's pretty straightforward, I think.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. That's much appreciated. And that's great that we're sort of ahead on talking to the librarians and identifying that. That's really good. Thank you. Okay, so moving on then. Next slide, I think. Okay, so coming back then a little bit around some of the supports for the self-study, and first there's just, that's the UCAP address that I would keep to your fingertips for administrative support if there's questions around the administrative sort of pieces of the self-study. But also any questions that you send to that UCAP address will be sort of channeled to the right people if Nina isn't the person to respond who kind of monitors that account. But really the piece we want to talk a bit now is sort of the rather more exciting piece, which is some of the sort of workshops and things that we're going to do through the year to try and help and support you in the CPR, and also an important piece to try and help you keep on track with it as well. I will say this is a really interesting year for us. It's the largest number of CPRs we have ever had, I think. I'm not even going to say what the number is because I think it might scare people on the call, because of course we don't control the cycle of those. So we have some years that are very light and some years that are incredibly busy, and this is an incredibly busy one. So we will be doing a lot. But over the last few years, we've really been trying to refine how we support programs, moving from just sort of having a launch meeting and letting people go off and do things to being a little more hands-on and being around for you through the process. So I'm pleased to sort of hand over here to Samantha, who's sort of taken the lead on doing what I think are going to be some really cool and exciting and interesting things, and let her talk a bit about those. Samantha.
Hi. So the pressure now is like the bar is at cool, that we're going to do cool things. So hopefully they're a little cool for you. What we're going to do this year, Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, is to provide you with a series of workshops throughout the year. And what we're finding is that faculties want, the programs want to talk about what they're going through, the questions that they have, the different process, where to get things. And so, like Lyndon said, we've tried to make the template a lot more user-friendly, but this type of interaction to keep you on track, but also to answer questions that we know that people have and provide some kind of framework for engagement and analysis, we think it's going to be, I'll dare I say, cool this year. So we're going to do 5 different workshops, and seminars, depending on how many people come, they're open to everyone. So it's not just it's not just CPR leads, it's not just chairs, it's not just admin staff. I would really encourage you to open it up to all members of your program, as a way to really think about the process. And it isn't necessarily something that you should just delegate one person to attend and take notes and pass it along. It's really about organizing yourself for process and analysis. And so being able to kind of think about it with that in mind, I think, is really useful. They're going to be about an hour to 2 hours long. The first one will be an hour and a half. And we because we'll also be recording them, and we're going to post them in ways that are not super public, but kind of open. We don't want to have kind of conversations about specific program things on the call. So we're going to have a Google form where you can pre-submit questions, and then we'll also turn off the recording and be able to answer any other specific questions that you have. And each one of these 5 workshops are focused on a specific topic of an area of the CPR self-study that you can be working on right now. So it can seem really daunting. And so we've kind of organized, like, if you want to start here, start here. You can do this right now. And so we're going to focus on that. And we're also bringing in faculty members who have done the CPR in the last couple of years to just like say where they started, where they ended, things that were helpful for them. Our focus is on what can be done at this moment, things that you can ask yourself in the program as well as others, because it's a collegial process during the process, and then approaches to take to think about the data, to think about the questions that you're asking, to think about analysis. Next slide, please. So the first workshop is going to be next week, and it's going to be, where do we begin? We're going to go over the self-study template. We are going to talk about like the very specific questions that you can get started on right now. We're going to talk about that, like that kind of barrier for engagement when you're like, I have no idea where to start. So kind of tips for that and how to start this conversation with your colleagues as well. It's going to be next Friday from 10 a.m. to 11:30. You're welcome to come at any point, drop in, drop out. It will be recorded if you're not able to make it. And we do have a Google form that you can submit questions. And that's going to be an email that will go out with an invite. Again, you're more than welcome to pass that invite on to anyone else. The next workshop that we're going to have will be about curriculum and learning outcomes. And that's actually something that is really fun for me, but I know is really terrifying and really daunting for a lot of people. And I always see thinking about curriculum and thinking about learning outcomes as such a wonderful opportunity to ensure that your vision of the program is aligned with how you're articulating it. And so that's what we'll be focusing on. And then in the new year, we are going to talk about storytelling with data. And that's when we get the OIPA data, the Office of Institutional Planning and Analysis data, to help you work through that. We also have talked to OIPA about some other supports that we can create to support you in doing that. So we'll let you know when those are kind of finalized. Initially, we were not going to have a workshop on retreat planning, but we've gotten a lot of questions about retreat planning. So we'll prepare that for you in the spring. And then at the end, we'll also talk about how to put that document together, what that analysis might look like, how you might prioritize recommendations and things like that. So I hope that they will be really, really useful for you, along with us being available over email. But these workshops have really been designed to account for the questions that we get kind of regularly, as well as the anxieties that people have about this process, and ways to think about it really productively, really collegially, really collaboratively. And I think it's really great because a lot of programs that I've worked with over the last couple of years get to the end and they're like, oh, wow, this has been great. I've learned so much. We're really excited to do these kind of new things in the coming years. And that's really the ideal part of the process. So we want to set you all up for that.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, I mean, I think we're really very, very excited about this. It's something we've been working on, we're trying to do, and we hope you'll find it productive. And as I say, we are very open to other things that people may need as well to try and help you as you go along. So please feel free to reach out to Samantha at any point, and she's a wonderful sort of resource on this as well. Okay, so we're making very good time this morning. I'm going to be able to give people some time back, which I'm sure people will be thrilled about. But Jennifer, I think you're going to say a little bit about next steps.
Sure, I will. You can use this extra half hour you gained in your life to get started on your CPR right away. So what I want to talk to you a little bit now about is the next steps that are coming up in the next week or so. So you will receive after this meeting soon a memo with some links and some contact information and things that you can follow up on right away. That includes a timeline with some dates that you can put in your calendar of some key milestones. You can also go to our website. We'll send the specific link to the CPR section. Go to our website and download the templates for the self-study and take a look at those and see what you have ahead of you. And you can also look at your previous CPR documents to sort of see where you're starting from and see where you're going. The UCAP website is linked here, and as I said, we'll be sending an email with that information as well. You'll also be receiving a calendar invite, as Samantha said, about the workshop on September 22nd, about where to begin. And please hold in your calendars this second workshop on October 27th at 11:30. And so I think I will end it there with a message that you will be hearing from us. We will help take this momentum from this meeting forward and help you move into the next steps that you can get started with right away. And as always, any questions you can send to our UCAP email address here.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. So I see a question about sharing a presentation. I think we're intending doing that later today or very soon, aren't we, Jennifer? The slide deck and the recording, is that correct?
Yeah, so the memo that we'll send soon will have a link to where you can find the recording, link to the other resources. If there are any unanswered questions in the chat after this meeting, we'll post responses to those as well. So you'll have that by the end of the day or tomorrow, I hope.
Yeah, great, thank you. But as I say, please just reach out to us with any particular questions. So otherwise, I'm going to say a big thank you to everyone for joining us this morning, and to all the people who sort of presented, and to my team as well for helping put this together, not just the presentation, but also I hope you can see some of the thought that's gone into, you know, the supporting and thinking about the CPR. You know, we are aware it's a lot of work for programs, and, you know, as I say, I'm really very committed to ensuring that this is a valuable process, as well as one that, you know, we're required to do. So while it might seem like a lot, we really want to make it manageable for you. At the end of the day, as I said where I started, you know, it's a student experience that's central to this. And at the end of the day, we are looking for you really to be thinking about things that you can do within your programs to help those students have a great experience and be successful in the program. So look forward to working with you in the coming months. We are here to help. Please reach out at any time. Otherwise, I hope people's term has begun well, and I would say have a good rest of the day and take good care. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Maybe my